you attend my talk yesterday? Well, I'm afraid you might be disappointed because yesterday's talk was about behavior, and I included lots of videos and lots of jokes. But I'm afraid this is a very serious talk, so I'll give you the opportunity to leave, possibly. I'd like to start the talk with questions and answers. And the first question I have is, why am I here? And although often I ask myself the question, why am I here? But I would like you to ask me the question, Mark, why am I here? Because I'd suggest the answer to that question is that you'd like clarification around the terminology of application management. You'd like a better understanding of its characteristics, the significance and challenges of application management, and some insight into how you can approach certain aspects. And so it depends. It depends really on your interest. I had the pleasure of giving this talk at the Topconf in Bucharest a couple of months ago, and I got some wide-ranging feedback. This was I think the most positive feedback I got. Very comprehensive presentation about the ups and downs of application lifecycle management, keep on preaching about business IT alignment, and on the other end of the scale, hot air. So clearly, some people like it, some people don't. So I'm trying to manage expectations. I'll be talking mostly about application management from a conceptual, abstract point of view, how you organize it, understanding the characteristics better. And I hope you find it insightful. I started off my career as a programmer, so I was really in the application management space from the beginning, developing applications, but particularly maintaining applications. Who of you are software engineers? Okay, and who of the software engineers focus mainly on development as opposed to maintenance? And who focuses on maintenance mostly then? Okay, we can talk to each other. I think we probably have similar experiences, because application maintenance is often a different area, different dynamics. And I'm particularly interested in what happens after the initial development, because from an economic perspective, it is a significant part of the application lifecycle. We'll come to that later on. You can see on what I call my visual CV what happened to my happiness when I got seduced into taking on management responsibilities. So I reinvented myself as a...
Describe why, as a programmer, you started losing your happiness as you get more experience?
No, well, it was really when I got seduced into taking on management responsibilities. As a programmer, I was happy. But they said, Mark, you're a good programmer. Why don't we make you a manager? Yeah, I think some of us recognize this. Yeah. Now, I was happy as a programmer, but it was very tempting, the status of management, that kind of stuff. So there's some career advice in here. And this was the most difficult decision in my career, to leave behind the status of management responsibilities. I'm independent, I work for myself, but I'm very closely affiliated with the ASL-BSL Foundation, which is a membership organization in the Netherlands, where we've collected lots of best practices in two areas: application management, which I'm talking about this morning, and information management, business information management from a business perspective. I'll be touching on that very slightly.
One thing about this graph, can you explain what does it mean to be 124%?
I'm really happy. I couldn't be more happy. You can't program it, but I'm happy. So just the frame of reference, I've built programs, I've managed programs, As a manager, I've managed application management departments, so I have experience in managing people who do this kind of work. I have been involved in selling application management services and marketing application management services. So I've had fairly broad experience in the whole field. The topics, 10 things I'd like to share with you about application management. We'll be going through them fairly quickly. I'd like to give you an overview of 10 things which I think are particularly significant for this field. Very happy to talk about it afterwards. I've written various papers, various publications on some of these topics, so there might be some more detail online. The difficulty with words, what do we mean by application lifecycle management? Humpty Dumpty said, when I use a word, it means just what I want it to mean. And you often come across this when people say application management, they have their particular way of defining what they mean. There aren't any universal definitions, so you have to be careful when using this terminology. So definitions, so what do we mean by these things? I'll be touching on those. The first thing is, if you look at an application, you could say it lives in various dimensions. You can look at it from an analytical dimension. Look at IT, we can talk about hardware, software, data, procedures, people and things. With applications, we're focusing on software, of course, but not system software, but software that's used for something to help something in the real world, to support something in the real world. You can look at applications from an informational point of view. It's about input, processing, storage, transport of information from place to place, and output. You can look at the functional dimension of an application, which is a particularly interesting topic researched by Checkland and Howell. If you think about the definition of what is an application, what is an information system, which programs would you include in a definition of an information system, and which programs would you exclude, it seems to be very arbitrary. It depends on what's important. And this was the main conclusion of these professors. How you define an application or an information system is very subjective. And the time dimension, the temporal dimension, I'll be touching on in a minute. First statement, application, very basic. An application is software that people and things use to support something in the real world. Now let's, I've got a little bit of interaction here. What would you say is the average life of an application?
It's after the product is released.
Yeah, after it's been released. So, you know, the useful period of life.
In what period?
Average, of course, so it's very broad. 5 years. 1 to 5?
Less than 1 year.
Less than 1 year. Wonderful. Wonderful.
At least 3 years.
At least 3 years. 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And this is all true. This is all true. It is really diverse. I've asked this question at conferences, in workshops, in courses, and on average, I would say it's about 12 years. Of course, depending on the environment, I'm talking mostly about administrative systems. The best answer I had from somebody was, he said, between 3 months and 30 years, which is probably right. So it's good to realize it really is a broad field. And you could look at the various phases that...
One question.
Yeah, please.
How do you understand it's the same application still?
Now, I call myself the IT paradigmologist because I study IT paradigms. But I could also call myself, or maybe call you, the IT philosopher, because it's an interesting question. If you have an application in one kind of technology, that performs a certain function. We're the IT department, they're the business. We're the IT department, we've built an application in Java, for instance, and it provides functionality to the business. We replaced this technology by a different technology, but it does exactly the same functionality. They don't notice the difference, apart from some minor details. Is that the same application? I don't know. I don't know. But it's a very interesting question. That's another topic I want to talk about. Great. Thank you for the I really love this, the interaction. We could say we go through various phases. We identify, you're the business, you identify the need for some kind of automation. You justify that it's worth investing in, so that's the economic justification. Then you get the IT department to realize the application, and then it goes into production, goes into use. And we have the parallel phases of operation, of it being used, it being evaluated whether it still performs the right kind of things, and modification, improvement, and this goes on for 12 years on average, after which we come into the very challenging phase of decommissioning applications. And that really is, in my experience, very challenging to get rid of applications. It's easy to create applications, it's more difficult to get rid of them. And you could see on a life cycle, you could say this is fairly short, this takes a long time. And as far as decommissioning is concerned, I've drawn it here as something that people start talking about. Is we should really be decommissioning this application. Let's talk about it next year. And then next year we should really be talking about decommissioning this. So it takes a long time. But finally somebody takes the decision, we'll get rid of the application. So we could say statement number 2 of 10, the application lifecycle starts with identification and ends with decommissioning. Another bit of interaction here. If you think about the costs of, and I'm looking at you, my maintenance friend here, looking at the costs of an application across the whole life cycle, what percentage do you think is spent on the initial development, so the initial development, release 1.0, and what's spent on the rest of the life cycle?
It depends how long is the rest of the life cycle.
That is correct. We'll take the average of 12 years.
That is the maintenance part after the release is about 80% actually.
Okay, 2080.
So the development actually costs 20%, but from client perspective, they usually don't understand this.
Yeah, yeah. Does anybody have any different opinions on 2080? 1090. 1090? Yeah.
Might be less than 10 years.
Yeah. Again, this is a question I've asked several thousand people. The answers are usually between 10 and 30% for the development. You might be right, it might be even less in some cases. On average, 2080. That's a very good... Now, next question. If we look at the rest of the life cycle, how much do you think we spend on keeping the system up and running and supporting the users, as opposed to developing new releases, modifying, improving the application?
60/40.
60/40. And 60 is operations?
40 is new releases.
Okay, so most on operations and support. Any other opinions?
Really depends on how long time.
It does. It does. This is true. This is true. These are just very general statements, just to give you an idea of what is possibly an average. But please realize that it does depend on the life cycle, the age of the application, the local things. The research I've done is more the other way around. That we seem to spend more, well, if we divide this, I've divided this 80 into these parts here, it's about 30-70. It does vary a lot. Then the next last point here. If we take the new releases that we develop, how much of that investment is made into making changes that the business actually benefits from directly, functional changes, and how much is more changes of a technical nature to security, keep things, performance maybe, keep things up to date, new changing to adopt to new versions of database management systems. What do you think the functional technical mix is?
I worked quite a few years as developer maintaining and actually decommissioning as well. And I can say that the second part is pretty real. First part is something actually didn't have to do that much. So
I've discovered, based on research, also looking at people like Gartner to see what they say, about 60-40. So 60% of what is spent on maintaining an application, improving it, the business benefits from, and 40, of course, the business benefits from technical changes, but less directly. And if you look at the benefits, there are, when you're developing an application, there are absolutely no benefits at all. All of the benefits occur when it gets into production. That's something that we often forget. And I've drawn a little diagram of that, what I just explained to you. It's also interesting to realize, looking at all IT costs, about half are spent on applications and half on infrastructure. That used to be something like 40% applications, 60% infrastructure. So it seems like infrastructure is getting cheaper and applications, relatively speaking, more economically significant. On the right-hand side here, I've made the division between staff, people, and stuff, like licenses and equipment. And that's, I got this from Gartner. It surprised me. I thought that people, staff, would be a higher percentage. So I've got a question mark behind that, but I'm sharing that with you. Now, if we say, we've just established about 20% of IT costs are spent on building stuff, 80% on managing and maintaining afterwards, what percentage of enterprise costs, total costs of an enterprise, do you think are spent on IT, as opposed to people, buildings, machines, and other resources? Do you have any idea?
it would be 2 to 10%.
2 to 10%. Any other thoughts? 15? 15's a lot. You're pretty spot on, I think. If you say on average, 5% is probably high on average. Probably closer to 3 or 4, but I've just taken 5. So it's, relatively speaking, for an enterprise, IT is not very important. Of course, it is very important, but from a cost perspective, it's a small investment, relatively. Now, what about this question? Thinking that you're the IT department, you're the users, you're the business, how much business productivity do you think that you lose because of IT problems?
I would rephrase, how much do we to invest in?
Yeah, agree. First you win productivity by investing in IT, but then, because things go wrong in IT from time to time, you lose productivity. How much do you think you lose? And there's very little research done on this. How much? 50? No, less than that. Although some people say it's a lot.
Roughly 10%.
10%, yeah. Between 4, the research that I found at a university in the Netherlands said between 4 and 10% is lost. On average, 7.6%, taken 8 here, is lost due to IT problems. half of that is due to problems in the systems themselves. So when the system goes down, that's a problem. But the other half is due to the users not using the systems properly, not understanding the systems. And that is really significant. So if you realize, first they spend 5% of all their money on IT, then they waste 4%, half of that 8%, by using the systems incorrectly. I think that's a great opportunity for us as an industry to help the business get more value out of their investments by using the systems better. And I'd like to see more. We have the role of key user or super user that you can turn to if you have a problem. I would like to see the role of a super duper user, and I invented that term, a super duper user who is proactively looking around in the department how people are using the systems and saying, helping them, you could use this better. I think there's a business case there to invest in.
That's actually being implemented in several cases, and few things have been found. For example, if a user is filling out a form and makes mistakes, you can notify him that he made a mistake or what he has to do. But majority of cases, if you send a notification bar, you made a mistake, you need to fix this or whatever, user does not read the message. He just closes the message. So
yeah. So I think you've identified a very good point that there are possibilities to inform the users automatically.
It has to be a co-worker or somebody who knows how to use the program, or it doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah, that is a similar point that you made earlier. I think that might be my next point. No, it's not. It's coming up. The term application lifecycle management can be confusing. Some people use it in a restricted sense, and they refer it just to talk about the activities for the longer term planning of an application, whereas other people use application lifecycle management to include everything. So please be aware when somebody says application lifecycle management, you have to ask, what do you mean? It can be confusing. Recently, a couple of months ago, the ISO organization came up with, for the first time, a standard specifically for application management, in which they cover operational stuff, management stuff, strategic stuff, supporting the users, maintaining and renewing software, thinking about the longer term strategy of an application and how to manage it. And if you break that down into the activities, you get this. This is available. I just want to make you aware of the existence of this standard. This is available online, which you can buy, the standard, but you can get a free preview, which gives you a basic understanding of the standard at the ISO organization. And we, as our foundation, are very proud to say that we contributed to this standard, because if you look at our model, the ASL, Application Lifecycle, Application Services Library, you'll see that the content of these areas very much correspond to the ISO standard. Believe me, they're more or less the same. So you could say where the ISO standard gives you a formal standard to assess how you do application management, our framework gives you guidance how to do that. Would you like a picture of this or the previous one? This one, okay, right.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
How many applications today have went through this ISO standard, and how many have been really standardized?
None. It's just been released. I think it was July or August. So it really is a very new standard. It took about 3 years to develop. These things, it's international. These things go very slowly. It'll be very interesting to see who sees value in this standard. And I'm thinking particularly of outsourcing service providers who want to demonstrate to their customers that they're doing application management to a recognized standard. A very interesting area. If you want some more information on that, please get in touch. Very pleased to help. I often use this to put application management or lifecycle management in context. I depict the business on the left-hand side, so we can change roles now. You're the business, you're IT. And the IT department on your side with application management, often application development, application management, and IT service management as two pretty big areas, very simplistic division of an IT department, with a relationship between the business, demand, they want something, IT supplies the information system, and the business uses it. And within the business, you'll notice I've defined the role, the area of business information management. People within the business who are responsible for dealing with the IT department, who are responsible for the information in their enterprise. It's not the IT responsibility, it's the business's responsibility. And if you want to position standards, you could look at these standards, frameworks and standards to support application management. We have a great ISO standard that gives insight into the characteristics, the quality of applications. Take a look at that if you're interested. There are various standards and frameworks for IT service management, and the IT for IT framework is quite new, worth taking a look at. Overarching standards for governance, architecture, and business relationship management. And we, our foundation, are very proud to say that we have a standard to help the business fulfill their responsibilities in dealing with IT, called the Business Information Services Library. And our publisher, Van Haren, has given me a link. You can get a free download of the pocket guide, which otherwise costs, I think, 15 euros. You can get that if you want, so take a picture or look at the slides afterwards, send me an email, and I'll give you a link to that. If you think that your business partners are struggling with their responsibilities, this guidance could possibly help them become better dancing partners with IT, because you've got to dance together. Looking at the time, I'm going to skip this, but this is, you could view application management as a black box, what goes in and what comes out. Just to refresh your memory, the term, be careful with the term application lifecycle management. It depends who says it as to what it means. What's the difference between a change and a project? I'm looking at my friend here as well in maintenance. What's the difference between a change and a project? Or anybody else? This is not...
I think the resources spent.
Yeah, so the effort. How much time do you spend on it? The size of it. Yeah. This is very arbitrary. It depends from organization to organization whether they call this piece of work a change or a project. Organizations that do the split on size, some organizations say if it's more than 20 days, it's a project, otherwise it's a change. Other organizations say if it's more than 20 months, it's a project. So it really, really depends. Some people talk about if it's in application development, the initial development, that's a project, and everything after that is a change. So really that depends. It's another confusing topic to be aware of. Now,
why is it
yeah, sure.
important to distinguish between change and project?
Well, it's just for communication. If somebody's,
Semiotic.
Sorry?
For semiotic reasons.
Yeah, well, semiotics, or just if you hear me talking about a project, you will automatically assume that because you will have a certain kind of a context, you will have a certain understanding of project in your world, And you might think that I'm talking about a project in the same way, but I'm just sharing that people use, in my experience, people use the term change and project in very widely differing ways. So just please be aware of the possible confusion. An excellent point that you made, sir, I'd like to refer back to. When we talk about an application, what are we managing? And I think because you talked about managing an implementation of an application, we could say a supplier provides us with a package with standard software. That has to be managed, and it's the supplier who manages the package. They give us new versions of the package. Within one single enterprise, you could have different implementations of that one package, maybe for two different divisions. You would implement it in one way, and you would implement it in another way, with different settings, different parameters, different settings. So you could say there are two different functional and technical implementations. So that's a second level of application that we have to manage. The third one, which sometimes people forget, is that you could have one implementation of an application, so exactly the same, just one implementation, but you'd have one business division that uses it this way, and another business division that uses it another way. For instance, if you have, I guess many of you will have to keep time. The time that you work, you'll have to register, record in a system. When do you have to, at the end of the month, when do you have to have your hours entered into the system? Is that the last day of the month, the first day of the next month, the first week of the next month? That varies. So that is a different use of exactly the same application. So from a user perspective, that use also has to be managed. And I think it's very interesting to distinguish between, are you managing the package, the implementation, or more at a user level, are you managing the use of the application? We've got 5 more minutes and I'm just past halfway. So I'm going to be selective in what I deal with. This topic of business IT alignment I find fascinating. And I'd like to focus just for a minute on the strategic area of deciding what you want to do with applications and whether you want to continue investing in them or decommission them. A technique that many people use is based on something like this. You get the business, you're the business again, and you're the IT department. You ask the business to look at all the applications that they use and assess the functional quality. So how important is the business process that the application supports? Question 1. And what is the value of the application to that business process? So is it an important business process, something that serves customers? And is the application supporting that process to a high degree? That will determine the functional quality. You technical guys can determine the maintainability. Is it easy to maintain? Is there lots of spaghetti in the code? And the operational ability. I'm not sure whether this is a correct word, but it's the operational side. Is it easy to monitor? Is it efficient? Do you have security risks? And if you plot those two assessments, the business's assessment on this axis and the technical assessment on this axis, and these are all applications, you can see that this one, application G for instance, the business doesn't value it highly. And the technical people say it's really difficult to maintain. or uses a lot of computing resources, this would be a candidate to consider retirement, decommissioning. Of course, this isn't a decision, but it's something to talk about. And really, this is just an instrument to get the business people and IT people to the same table to start talking about the future of their application portfolio, because that really is the key to decide whether you want to keep on investing in applications, re-platform them to another technical platform, replace them by other applications. Remediate is to improve the inside. Consolidate, sometimes you can combine applications. You can enhance them, migrate them, or finally decommission them. And my friends at Capgemini, where I used to work, they came up with this depiction, which is great. But really, this is extremely challenging. Rationalization. Developing is easy, rationalizing and decommissioning is very difficult. And it really depends on the kind of application that you have. Think about your applications. Are they trains? Are they buses? Are they cars? Or are they scooters? This is a scooter application. Of course, you treat this kind of application differently than an SAP application, which is the backbone of an enterprise. It has different dynamics. So how you deal with application management varies from application to application. We've got one more to go. We often talk about business and IT alignment. IT won't be treated as a trusted strategic partner by the business until you have the basics under control. If there are lots of outages, you won't be a credible partner. And there is a lot of misunderstanding between business and IT people, as I talked about yesterday. Behavior is the key. I'm leaving you with examples of desired behavior that people have established. They say, business, if you do this, IT, if you do that, that will help you collaborate better and get more value out of the investment. I've done lots of international workshops on this. There's a link to a paper on that. The key is really, 2 minutes, the key is really determining strategy, is not making an analysis of the functional quality and the technical quality, but getting the business and IT to the same table and having mature discussions about the application. That is really, the people part is really the key. And as Peter Drucker, the management guru's guru, he said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can make great plans, but in the end it's about people, politics, religion and money. Those will be the things that determine the success of application lifecycle management. One final point I'd like to, particularly for people, by the way, here's a link to some great mind maps, not only for our frameworks, but other frameworks. So that's in the slide deck as well. I'd like to, has anybody come across Dave Snowden and the Kinefin framework? Please forget everything that I said and look at the Kinefin framework. He's easy to find, and even better, he's going to be in Tallinn in a couple of weeks' time at the ITSMF, IT Service Management Forum event. He's speaking as the final keynote speaker. He is really one of the most fundamental thinkers that I've come across in the last 5 to 10 years. It's a relatively cheap event, 124 euros, and you can find the information here. Please take a look at his stuff. Dave Snowden, Kinefin, and take a look at this event, whether you find it interesting. With that, we're done. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for the interaction. It was really great to have your feedback on some topics, and we're off to the next session. Thank you.